Welcome to our deep dive. This time it's Jung's map of the soul. And you've given me some really fascinating excerpts here from Murray Stein's introduction, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to get into this with you. We're going deep into how Jung saw the human psyche.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, this is not your Psych 101
Oh,
kind of
right.
stuff. This is like the deep end of the pool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Jung was interested in uh, not just our everyday thoughts and feelings, but also,
Right.
those deeper recesses of the psyche, that unconscious
Yeah.
dimension that really shapes
Yeah.
who we are and how we relate to the world, even though we might not even be aware of it.
And Stein really emphasizes that Jung considered consciousness to be like the very essence of life itself. Like
Yeah.
what separates us from like a rock.
Absolutely. He calls it the life factor,
Mm.
the capacity to be aware and to experience the world,
Yeah.
and to engage with it.
And and here's where things get really interesting to me. Stein points out that it's almost impossible for most people to separate consciousness from its actual content.
Yeah.
We're always thinking, feeling, remembering something.
That's right, yeah. For most of us, consciousness is always bound up with specific content.
Yeah.
It's like a stage where all of our thoughts and memories and emotions and so on are constantly playing out their dramas.
Yeah. Yeah. And he says only those super advanced spiritual practitioners can actually pull off that detachment from
Right.
all the mental chatter. It makes you wonder what that would even feel like.
Yeah. It's it's a profound concept that Jung explores and suggests that to achieve that state of pure awareness, it requires a lot of discipline and practice.
Yeah.
It's like trying to quiet the mind in order to experience that space
Yeah.
underneath all of that mental chatter.
So where does the ego fit into all of this?
Right.
We hear that term all the time,
Sure.
but what did Jung actually mean by it?
Well, the ego for Jung is that part of us that says, I. It's the center of our conscious awareness.
Mm.
It's our sense of self. It's what enables us to experience the world from our own unique,
Right.
individual perspective.
And Stein highlights that this ego isn't something we're born with,
No.
fully formed.
Yeah.
It develops through our interactions with the world,
Yeah.
especially those moments when we kind of bump up against reality.
Yeah. And he calls it the collisions,
Yeah.
the challenges and conflicts we face in life
Mhm.
that actually force the ego
Okay.
to grow
Yeah.
and to adapt. It's like a muscle. The more you use it,
Yeah.
the stronger it becomes.
And those collisions don't just strengthen the ego overall, but they help it develop specific
Yeah.
functions to navigate the world.
Yeah, that's right. Jung identified 4 key functions of the ego: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition.
Mm.
And these are like the tools that we use to process information and to make
Mhm.
decisions. So if you're faced with a problem, do you rely on logic and analysis, or do you go with your gut feeling? That gives you a clue about which function you tend to lean on.
I like that. This is already way more nuanced than those personality quizzes you see online.
Right.
So are we saying some people are just better at certain functions than others?
Well, each of these functions can actually operate in either an introverted or extroverted way,
Okay.
according to Jung. So you might be, for example, an extroverted thinker at work, leading meetings and, making strategic decisions,
Right.
but an introverted thinker at home,
Yeah.
lost in contemplation as you're writing in your journal.
Right.
So we all have our own unique blend of these functions, both introverted and extroverted.
This is a choose your own adventure through the psyche now.
That's right.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, but before we get lost in all the possibilities,
Right.
we need to talk about complexes. Those sound a little, well, complex.
They can be. Think about this. Complexes are bundles of thoughts, feelings, and memories that are all kind of emotionally charged.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to form around experiences that were especially difficult or traumatic,
Yeah.
especially experiences where there was some kind of moral conflict involved.
That reminds me of this one time when I accidentally spilled grape juice all over my friend's white carpet at a party. I still cringe thinking about it.
That's a perfect example.
Mhm.
Those memories and emotions got all tangled up together and formed a complex, and whenever something triggers that complex, it can really have a powerful impact on your behavior.
Right.
And even lead you to act out in ways you don't fully understand.
Yeah. Stein mentions that Jung's early work on complexes was influenced by his collaboration with Freud.
That's right.
It's fascinating how these two giants of psychology started out together
Yeah.
and then went on to develop such distinct views.
It's a fascinating chapter in the history of psychology. And initially, Jung's interest in complexes stemmed from his work of Freud and psychoanalysis.
Mm-hmm.
But as they continued their research, their perspectives
Yeah.
diverged significantly,
Uh-huh.
and their infamous split was actually
Yeah.
fueled by their differing views
Okay.
on complexes in the unconscious.
What were some of the key differences in their thinking that
Well,
eventually led to that split?
Freud primarily viewed complexes as rooted in repressed sexual desires,
Okay.
stemming from childhood experiences.
Mm.
But Jung had a broader perspective. He believed that complexes could arise from a wider range of experiences
Okay.
and often contained what he called an archetypal element, which
Mm.
we'll explore a bit later.
Archetypes. Okay. Those sound pretty abstract.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand what exactly we're talking about here?
Sure. Imagine
What are these archetypes?
universal inborn patterns of thought and behavior
Okay.
that reside in what Jung called the collective unconscious.
The collective unconscious. So like a vast reservoir of shared human experience that transcends our individual lives.
That's it. Jung believed we all tap into this collective unconscious, and these archetypes are like psychic blueprints that shape how we understand the world
Okay.
and experience universal things like birth, death, love, power.
So are these archetypes like characters in our inner world? Do they have
Well,
personalities?
Not exactly characters in the traditional sense,
Okay.
but they're more like underlying patterns or energies that express themselves through symbols, and we find those symbols
Where?
in myths and stories and religious traditions
Yeah.
and even our dreams.
So how do these archetypes actually show up in our everyday lives? How can we recognize them?
One really compelling example is the hero's journey. This is an archetype Jung saw reflected
Yeah.
in countless stories and myths
Yeah.
across cultures.
Yeah.
So think about those classic tales where a hero faces challenges, overcomes obstacles, and ultimately transforms. That pattern resonates with us because it taps into something very deep within the human psyche.
It's like those stories are speaking to some universal truth, some
Yeah.
shared experience that transcends
Time and
Uh-huh.
culture.
Precisely.
So does that mean we're essentially puppets controlled by these unseen archetypal forces?
Not at all. Jung believed that while archetypes exert a powerful influence, we're not simply at their mercy. We can actually become aware of them,
Okay.
understand how they operate in our lives, and ultimately integrate them into our conscious personalities.
Integration sounds like a tall order, especially when it comes to something like the shadow.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
from what I understand, that's not exactly the most pleasant
That's true.
part of ourselves.
You're right. The shadow represents those aspects of our personality that we tend to reject or deny,
Okay.
the qualities that we deem negative or unacceptable, and it's often shaped by societal pressures and the need to conform. Think about all of those imperfections and flaws.
We try to keep hidden from the world.
So is it like those little voices of self-doubt,
Yeah.
the negative thoughts that we try to push away? Is that part of the shadow?
It can be, but here's the catch. Jung believed that suppressing the shadow actually makes it more powerful.
Yeah.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Right.
It's bound to keep popping up,
Right.
often in ways we don't expect.
Yeah. The more we deny parts of ourselves, the more they seem to kind of control us
Right.
in those unconscious ways. It's like they're working against us from the shadows.
Precisely. One of Jung's patients, Ms. Miller, illustrates this point beautifully. She was a very feminine woman
Sure.
on the surface, but her shadow was full of masculine energy that she had repressed. And this repression was actually contributing to her psychological distress.
Okay, so what's the solution? How do we deal with this shadow side of ourselves without letting it take over?
Well,
Do we try to fight it?
Jung believed that the key is integration. It's bringing those hidden aspects of ourselves into conscious awareness.
Yeah.
Not about becoming those negative qualities,
Right.
but acknowledging their existence, understanding their influence, and learning to work with them rather than against them.
So it's not about striving for some impossible ideal of perfection, but about
That's a good way.
embracing the entirety of who we are, even
Yeah.
the messy parts.
That's right.
And this integration process is closely linked to another crucial archetype, the persona,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of like our public image, the mask we wear in social situations, the carefully curated version of ourselves
Yeah.
that we present to the world.
That's right. The persona is the archetype of the mask,
Yeah.
the social roles that we play,
Mm.
the face that we present to the world.
Yeah.
And it's shaped by cultural norms and our desire to fit in,
Yeah.
to belong.
So is having a persona always a bad thing?
Well-
I mean, we kind of need to play certain roles in society,
It's
right?
not inherently
Well,
bad.
Yeah.
A healthy persona is flexible and adaptable
Mhm.
and allows us to move through different social contexts
Right.
with ease and to interact effectively with others. But problems arise when the ego becomes too strongly identified with
Oh.
the persona.
So, like when our public image becomes so important that we lose sight of who we actually are
Yeah.
beneath the mask?
Exactly.
When we get so caught up in playing the role
Yes.
that we forget our authentic selves?
If we become too attached to a particular persona, it can stifle our individuality and prevent us from fully expressing our
Yeah.
true selves.
Right.
It can be like living someone else's life instead of our own.
This whole concept of balancing the shadow and the persona is really fascinating.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder, how does all of this play out over a person's entire lifespan?
What?
Didn't Jung see psychological development as a lifelong journey?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Unlike theories that focus solely on childhood, Jung believed that psychological development unfolds throughout life, and he proposed 4 stages of consciousness,
Okay.
each marked by different ways of perceiving and interacting with the world.
So these stages aren't just about getting older.
No.
There's a real opportunity for growth and transformation at each stage.
Jung believed that as we age, we have the opportunity to integrate our shadow,
Okay.
develop a more balanced persona,
Okay.
and ultimately connect with the self, that center of our being
Yeah.
that holds it all together.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong process of
Right.
becoming more whole, more aware, more genuinely ourselves.
Except this self sounds like a pretty big deal in Jung's map of the soul. I have a feeling we're going to be exploring that in more detail
Yeah.
later on. But before we get ahead of ourselves, there's one more fascinating concept we need to dive into: synchronicity.
That's right. That's a whole other layer
Yeah.
of exploration. Synchronicity is where Jung really challenges our understanding of how the universe works
Right.
and how we fit into the grand scheme of things.
It's one of the things that I find so intriguing about Jung. Like, he's suggesting there's this hidden language that the universe speaks. But how do we learn to understand it?
Right.
Maybe that's something we can delve into
Yeah.
in our next segment.
Let's take a pause here and we'll explore
Yeah.
that fascinating world of synchronicity next.
Sounds good. I'm ready.
Yeah. Get ready for some mind-bending concepts.
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right. So we're back and ready to dive into this idea of synchronicity.
Yeah.
It sounds like this is where things get really
Yeah.
intriguing, almost mystical. We're talking about those meaningful coincidences
Yeah.
that make you wonder if there's more to life than meets the eye.
Yeah. That's the essence of it. What's fascinating about Jung's approach is that he didn't dismiss these synchronicities
Right.
as just mere coincidence. He actually saw them as an expression of a deeper interconnectedness,
Okay.
a hidden order in the universe that operates beyond our usual understanding of cause and effect.
It's like those times when you're thinking about someone you haven't seen in years and all of a sudden they call you out of the blue.
Right.
Or you stumble across their name in a book.
Exactly.
Are those just random events, or is there something more going on?
Yeah, that's precisely the question that Jung grappled with. And he believed that synchronistic events are often charged with meaning.
Okay.
Even if that meaning isn't immediately apparent, they can be like glimpses into a hidden dimension of reality,
Okay.
where events are linked not just by causality, but by a deeper significance.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Can you give me a more concrete example of
Sure.
what a synchronistic event might look like?
So let's say you've been feeling stuck in a rut, unsure about a big decision,
Yeah.
and then you randomly open a book to a passage that offers the perfect insight, or you overhear a conversation
Okay.
that provides the clarity that you need.
I've had experiences like that. It's almost like the universe is trying to tell you something. But is that really what's happening, or am I just reading too much into things?
Well, from a Jungian perspective, these sorts of events might be more than just chance occurrences.
Mm.
They could be seen as signs from the unconscious, nudges from something larger than ourselves,
Okay.
or even reflections of a deeper connection between people and events. Recognizing that there might be layers of reality
Yeah.
beyond our typical understanding, levels of interconnectedness
Uh-huh.
that we don't fully grasp.
So that brings up an important question. If these synchronistic events aren't just random,
Right.
how do we make sense of them? How do we know if there's a message we're supposed to be receiving?
Well, that's where the real work begins. Jung believed that synchronicity often acts as a bridge between the conscious
Okay.
and unconscious minds. These meaningful coincidences can be like clues from the depths of our psyche,
Okay.
offering valuable insights into our own inner world.
So it's not just about the external event itself, but what that event triggers within us.
Exactly.
The thoughts, feelings, memories that arise.
A synchronistic event can spark a chain of associations or memories or emotions. It might challenge our assumptions
Okay.
or even point us in a new direction. The key is to pay attention to those internal responses,
Yeah.
to explore what meaning they hold for us personally.
It makes those aha moments feel so much more profound.
Right.
Like they're not just random bursts of insight,
Yeah.
but whispers from a deeper source.
That's the beauty of it. Jung was all about helping people connect with that deeper level of meaning in their lives,
Right.
recognizing the interplay between the inner and outer world. He saw synchronicity as one way that the unconscious communicates with us.
Okay.
Those unexpected events can be like the unconscious tapping us on the shoulder,
Right.
trying to get our attention.
That reminds me of something that Stein mentioned about Jung's view of the unconscious.
Yeah.
He wasn't just trying to analyze it or explain it away.
No.
He was interested in engaging with it
Yes.
and having a kind of dialogue with
Yes.
the unconscious.
You hit on a crucial point. Jung didn't view the unconscious as just a repository of repressed memories or dark impulses. He saw it as a source of creativity, wisdom, and even spiritual insight.
So these synchronistic events could be seen as part of that dialogue, a way for the unconscious to offer guidance,
Exactly.
share wisdom,
That's right.
maybe even challenge our perspectives.
That's right. And it's up to us to pay attention to those whispers from the depths,
Yeah,
to explore what they might be trying to tell us about ourselves and our place in the world.
that's pretty mind-blowing. It makes you wonder how many subtle messages we might be missing just because we're not paying close enough attention.
It's something Jung explored, and he believed that modern Western culture tends to overemphasize rationality and logic,
Okay.
often at the expense of intuition and the realm of symbols. So we become so focused on the how of things
Yeah.
that we miss the why.
So we're so busy analyzing and explaining that we lose sight of the deeper meaning, the interconnectedness
That's right.
that's all around us.
It's a risk. And it can lead to a sense of spiritual emptiness,
Yeah.
a disconnect from something larger than ourselves.
It seems like Jung's map of the soul is really a call to stay open to the mystery of life,
Absolutely.
to the possibility that there's more going on than
Sure.
what we see on the surface.
It's about embracing the unknown, recognizing the limitations of our rational minds, and being willing to step outside our comfort zones to explore the deeper dimensions of the psyche.
And that exploration, that journey of self-discovery can be a lifelong process, right?
That's a core principle in Jung's work. He saw psychological development as an ongoing journey, a process of individuation that unfolds throughout our lives.
Stein outlines these stages of consciousness that Jung identified, and he starts with participation mystique, a state of total immersion in the world, where there's no clear sense of separation between ourselves and everything around us.
It's a beautiful way to describe it. In this early stage, our consciousness is merged with the environment. It's like we're swimming in an ocean of experience without knowing where we begin and end.
It's like a baby's experience of the world.
Exactly.
They don't have that solid sense of self yet.
Right.
Everything is just one big flowing experience.
And Jung believed we all start in this state of participation mystique. It's a necessary phase of development. But as we grow, we begin to differentiate ourselves from the world around us.
So that's when that sense of being a separate individual starts to develop.
And that differentiation process leads to the second stage of consciousness, where projections become more localized.
Projections. Can you remind me what those are again?
Sure. Projections are basically unconscious contents, thoughts, feelings, impulses that we attribute to other people or things. It's like we're projecting our own inner world onto the external world. So, for example, you might assume your boss is angry with you just because you're feeling anxious about a presentation.
Right.
You're projecting your own anxiety onto them.
Got it.
So in this second stage, our projections become more focused.
Okay.
Less about experiencing the world as an extension of ourselves. And more about attributing specific qualities to particular individuals or objects.
This makes so much sense. I've definitely done that before.
Right.
And this is also the stage where we start to develop those personas that we were talking about earlier. As we become more aware of social expectations and demands, we start creating those masks, those roles that help us navigate interactions.
Exactly.
And if we're not careful, those personas can become so ingrained that we start to believe the mask is who we really are.
Exactly. But the good news is that these stages of consciousness aren't fixed. There's always the potential for growth and transformation.
So what comes after that second stage, the stage of localized projections?
Well, the third stage is marked by a fascinating shift
Yeah.
in focus from the personal to the impersonal.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What does that look like in practice?
Instead of projecting our unconscious contents
Okay.
onto specific people, we begin to attribute them to larger concepts or systems.
Oh, okay.
Things like God, fate, or the laws of nature.
So instead of blaming our boss for our anxiety, we might start questioning the meaning of life.
Exactly.
Or feeling like fate is working against us.
You got it. And this stage often coincides with the development of philosophical or religious beliefs.
Okay.
We start to see meaning and purpose in something larger than ourselves.
Right.
Something that transcends our individual experience.
Like we're expanding our understanding of the world, moving beyond those personal projections.
Yes.
To connect with something transcendent.
That's a powerful way to describe it. And it can be a positive step in development. You know, it allows us to step back from our egocentric perspective and connect with something bigger.
Yeah.
However, there's also a potential pitfall here.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah?
What happens if we get stuck in this third stage? What's the potential downside?
Well, we can become overly attached to those abstract concepts, those impersonal systems. Our beliefs can become rigid, making it difficult to see things from other perspectives.
Right.
It's like trading one set of projections for another.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like there's a danger of losing ourselves in those grand narratives, forgetting that they're still just projections in our own minds.
You're right. And that brings us to the fourth stage of consciousness.
Okay.
A stage that Jung found particularly challenging for modern Western culture.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
What makes this fourth stage so unique and challenging?
Well, it seems as if projections have vanished completely in this stage.
Okay.
You know, we've moved beyond attributing our unconscious contents to specific individuals or even abstract systems.
So where do those projections go? Do they just disappear?
Not quite. Jung observed that in this stage, the ego itself becomes the recipient of those projections.
Wait, so we're essentially projecting onto ourselves.
It might sound strange, but that's what Jung saw happening. The ego in this stage becomes inflated. It takes on a godlike position, believing it's the sole source of meaning and truth.
So it's like we become our own little gods, convinced of our own righteousness and superiority.
Yes, and Jung saw this as a dangerous development.
Right.
You know, an inflated ego leads to arrogance, a sense of invulnerability, and a lack of empathy for others.
Sounds like the ultimate shadow trap. We've conquered all those external projections.
Yeah.
Only to fall prey to the most insidious projection of all. The projection of our own inflated ego.
That's the paradox of this stage.
Yeah.
It represents an advance in consciousness.
Yeah.
In some ways, but it also holds the potential for a kind of spiritual hubris. It's like we've climbed to the top of the mountain only to find ourselves lost in the clouds.
This is all giving me so much to think about. It makes you wonder how we navigate these stages of consciousness without getting lost or falling into those shadow traps along the way.
That's the essential question Jung dedicated his life to exploring. And while he didn't offer a simple roadmap, he did provide some valuable insights into that process of individuation, of becoming more whole, more aware, and more truly ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe we could delve into some of those insights in the next segment.
That sounds fascinating. I'm eager to hear more about those. Jung's map of the soul is already proving to be quite the journey. We've explored Jung's map of the soul, the stages of consciousness, the shadow, the persona, those synchronicities. It's all well and good to understand it all, but how do we actually put this into practice? How do we support our own individuation, that journey toward wholeness?
That's the million-dollar question. And this is where Jung's emphasis on shadow integration and persona development becomes really practical. It's not about eradicating the shadow or pretending the persona doesn't exist. It's about bringing those aspects of ourselves into the light, understanding their influence, working with them instead of against them.
Okay, that makes sense in theory, but how do we actually do that? It can't be as simple as just, saying, hey, Shadow, nice to meet you.
It's definitely a process and no one size fits all. But one key practice Jung emphasized is paying attention to our dreams. He believed dreams offer a direct line to the unconscious, revealing those shadow aspects we might be repressing or denying.
So those weird symbolic dreams I have, they're not just random firings, they're actually trying to tell me something.
They might be. Jung saw dreams as a form of compensation, a way for the unconscious to balance out the one-sidedness of our conscious attitudes. So imagine you're always striving for perfection in your waking life. Your dreams might show you those messy, imperfect parts of yourself that you're trying to ignore.
Like our dreams are trying to nudge us toward a more complete picture of ourselves, showing us the parts we're hiding. So once we're aware of those shadow elements, what then? Do we change them, tame them, make them more palatable?
It's not about changing or getting rid of them. It's about acceptance,
Yeah.
acknowledging their existence, understanding their influence, integrating them into a more balanced self.
This sounds like some deep inner work, not exactly light beach reading.
It can be challenging, for sure, and it's often lifelong, but the rewards are profound. Integrating the shadow, we tap into a wider range of energy and potential. We become more authentic, more resilient, less controlled by unconscious forces.
Like befriending the parts of ourselves we've been at war with, realizing they have something to teach us.
Beautifully put. And while we're talking integration, don't forget the persona. That mask we wear, those roles we play. Finding that sweet spot between adapting to the world and staying true to ourselves.
A balancing act. We need the persona to navigate, but don't want to lose touch with our authentic selves.
Exactly. Too rigid, we lose ourselves. Reject social norms, we isolate ourselves. It's honoring individuality and respecting connection.
What a deep dive. Jung's map of the soul is so much more than just psychology. It's a framework for understanding ourselves, exploring our being, finding meaning in this wild ride of life.
And what's so relevant is that it speaks to something universal. The longing for wholeness, connection, self-discovery.
And it's a journey we can start anytime. No deadline for self-discovery. What key takeaways do you hope our listeners will take from this deep dive? What would you invite them to reflect on as they explore Jung's ideas?
Most importantly, remember, this is an invitation to an ongoing process. Not about perfect enlightenment, but cultivating curiosity and compassion with our inner world. Pay attention to your dreams. Reflect on the challenges that shaped your ego. Notice how your persona helps you and when it might overshadow you. And stay open to synchronicity. Those might be the universe trying to get your attention.
Those are some beautiful reflections. I'm walking away with a whole new perspective, inspired to continue exploring. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.